What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. Tyrese Haliburton had zero interest in letting that phenomenon extend into the start of Game 4. Immediately coming out the gates, bringing that energy, bringing that flow. I thought Stan Van Gundy had an interesting point in the broadcast talking about how the point guard is the guy that really pushes his team to run, not necessarily the coach. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that assertion because we've seen coaches make teams run more. I mean, frankly, this year, just Kenny Atkinson and what he did with the Cavs got them to run more than they did in years past. But I do think it's a combination of both. And I think the way I would kind of like tweak that take from Stan Van Gundy is I would say your point guard can supersede, or I would even say your point guard, your superstar, your foundational offensive fulcrum can overcome any sort of coaching roster circumstance and get guys to run and get guys to take on their identity as an offensive player. That's why over the years we saw so many different types of players thrive alongside Steph Curry. So many different types of players like we've seen now in recent years, guys that weren't on older versions of the Nuggets, guys like Peyton Watson, guys like Christian Brown, guys like Russell Westbrook that have thrived with him. And with LeBron James, just every single guy who can knock down a catch and shoot jump shot and is smart, knows how to be in the right place. Those guys just seem to fit with LeBron and do it well. I think that you can have an offensive fulcrum that can kind of inject life into an offense irrespective of your coach. And I thought, Tyrese Haliburton in many ways is the identity of this Pacers team. And even going back to some of the stretches in last year's postseason when they looked bad, a lot of it had to center around Haliburton kind of just going passive for various reasons, whether it was, obviously he wasn't the same athlete last year that he was this year because of his hamstring injury, but similarly, the instances of ball denial that we've seen that have taken him in his kind of like flow out of games and how it can impact the Pacers. But at this phase of his career, he's far more consistently engaged. He's far more consistently bringing that kind of like assertion on the offensive end. And those stretches have been few and far between. Like when we watched the Pacers at the end of Game 3, that was weird. That was unusual for a team that has consistently been firing on all cylinders in this postseason run. Similarly, in that Cavs game, it's like, oh, that's really weird. Well, they came out in Game 4 and hung 80 points in the first half. And so there's just like a relentless kind of identity to this basketball team. And I do think it stems from Haliburton. I do think he's the driving force. Generally speaking, these kinds of players, speaking back to Tyrese Haliburton and his pushback against him being the most overrated player in the league, I generally think that advantage creators are underrated in the NBA. Yes, I'm saying even guys like Steph, even guys like LeBron, even guys like Nikola Jokic, outside of their fan bases, there's a reason why those fan bases scream about it all the time. There's a reason why Denver fans are constantly trying to tell you about Jokic and what he does. There's a reason why Steph fans are doing that with Steph. There's a reason why LeBron fans are doing that with LeBron. There's a reason why Luka fans are doing that with Luka. Because flat out, when you have an offensive player that can create advantages, putting your role players in a situation where instead of facing a set defender, they have someone sprinting at them or they're operating in an opening, every player in the NBA becomes like 4 times as good as they are when they don't get to operate within an advantage. It is arguably the most important trait that any basketball player can bring to the table. It is why I have always been drawn to offensive engines more than I've been drawn to like kind of the stereotypical two-way scorer type of player. The type of player that can consistently set his teammates up with advantages is going to make life easier in every phase of the game. And Tyrese is just one of the best at it. Even when we looked at the down the stretch part of this game, like when the Knicks made that run and they cut it down to, I think they got it down as close as 5, if I remember correctly, before Siakam hits a 3 in the right corner. It was like 4 or 5 points, something like that. All it is like Haliburton brings the ball to the floor with pace. Nembhard comes into a guard screen, slips out of it, and 2 people linger on the ball on Haliburton for just a split second. Haliburton just pitches it over the top, and when Nembhard catches it, the guy closing out on him is closing out behind his right shoulder. And so he's like, oh, shit, I got a driving lane. And so he just goes down into the lane. And as he's going down in the lane, OG Anunoby has no choice but to step over. He's the low man. So he's the guy that has to step over and be in help. Easy extra pass to Pascal Siakam in the right corner, knocks down the three. That ends up being a monstrously important shot in this game. Zero mention of that in the box score. That's a Nembhard assist and a Siakam catch and shoot three. There is no mention of that in the box score for Tyrese Haliburton. Advantage creators are vastly underrated because if you look at the box score, it's not going to account for the simple fact that they lean the defense towards them and each player has done it in a different way. Haliburton does it different than Jokic. Jokic does it different than Steph. Steph does it different than Luka or LeBron in the past. These guys all do it in different ways, but it more or less manifests in advantage creation. The Tyrese Haliburton layup that he had down the stretch right after the Siakam three. They just ran a guard screen and the guard lingered too long and it blew the play up and led to a wide open three for Siakam. So what happens on the very next guard screen? Brunson throws a half-hearted hedge because he's hesitant to leave his shooter and Haliburton just turns the corner. What's the advantage there? The advantage is the guy who's guarding him has to get through a screen with no help. And he's going to have a hard time keeping in front of a fast guard like Tyrese Haliburton like that. But that is a reward for the fact that Tyrese Haliburton so religiously makes those reads over and over and over again. And it kind of manifests in the identity of this roster. Even the Miles Turner foul where he draws the foul late. It wasn't even a Haliburton action. It was an Andrew Nembhard action, but he comes off the screen. Karl Anthony Towns has to step up to contest. As a result, Miles Turner is diving to the basket with Mikal Bridges trying to box him out. And so even though Siakam doesn't get the rebound, he just kind of taps at it. It leaves a situation where all of a sudden this skinny 6'7" dude is trying to deal with the starting center for the Indiana Pacers, and he's just going to go get an offensive rebound. Advantage creation is a thing that doesn't manifest in the box score. In that case, Andrew Nembhard coming off of a screen. That doesn't show as an assist. If any, it shows as a missed field goal. It is a negative thing on his box score. But because he came off of that action with pace, because he set his man up for the screen and got separation, he was able to force a switch that led to a different kind of advantage. Miles Turner, inside position against a skinny, small Mikal Bridges. Key play in the game, he gets to the foul line. Advantage creation is underrated. And I think we don't talk about it nearly enough. And there's a reason why that type of player is the type of player that I find myself gravitating towards. And with Tyrese Haliburton, he's kind of another one of those guys similar to Jason Tatum, where there's kind of two versions of him on any given night. There's the star version of him, and then there's the superstar version of him. And similarly with Tatum, the superstar version of Tyrese Haliburton comes from when the jump shot is going in. When he's being aggressive as a scorer, he impacts the game at a level as high as the very best players in the NBA. Now, his floor is high. His advantage creation is such a valuable tool that he can be the 8th or 9th best player in the league, averaging 18 points and 9 assists, right? That's a pretty innocuous box score. Now, again, that box score is underrating the impact that he brings, but that is still a star-level player with a stat line more in line with what you see from the 45th best player in the league, right? That's the advantage creation piece. That's the floor for Tyrese Haliburton. When he brings the shooting, when he's knocking down those threes coming off of ball screens, when he's knocking down those mid-range pull-ups coming off of ball screens, when he's taking when he's taking Karl Anthony Towns or Mitchell Robinson out on a switch and hitting a three in their face, or Jalen Brunson and hitting a three in his face, that switch beating, that is the top end of him as a scorer. And when he does all of that stuff, they react to his shooting, which gets him the driving lanes. That's when he starts getting into the basket. And he's actually a pretty good downhill athlete. Him and TJ McConnell kind of remind me of each other in that sense, where they are just constantly playing downhill. And so even though they may not be the first step athletes that you see like Anthony Edwards, they are athletes that generate advantage with pace. They keep moving all the time, and they capitalize on the defense letting go of the rope in that perpetual motion that they bring to the table. But awesome night from Tyrese Haliburton. Just one of those iconic performances in his career. 32 points, 12 rebounds, 15 assists. And here's the thing, doesn't turn the damn basketball over. He's less than 2 turnovers per game in this entire postseason run. I think he has 27 turnovers in 14 games. That is... Not only is that going to be vitally important for a potential Oklahoma City Thunder series, which we're about to debate with Jackson here in a few minutes, that is just preposterous considering the usage, the types of difficult passes that he's making. There's these jump passes, these double pump passes. He had this pass where he got caught in between reads, and like at the last second, like he like looked at Miles Turner on a roll, decided not to pass to him, looked over to the side, then looked back to Turner and like floated a perfect pass against a 3-quarter front that just barely got over the defender's fingertips and just fed Miles Turner in for a layup. And it was like all while he was in midair. It was just an unbelievable pass. Like the kinds of difficult skip passes, swing passes, the kinds of off the dribble passes that he throws to not turn the basketball over is truly remarkable. And, you know, if you haven't been exposed to Tyrese Haliburton and what he's capable of, and I don't know how you wouldn't be, he's hit 2 or 3 game winners in this postseason, or, obviously the Knicks game wasn't a game winner, but a shot that effectively put them in position to win the game. He's been, between the in-season tournament run that he had last year, even the conference finals run last year, which didn't really showcase his high-end scoring as often as it could have been, but it showcased a lot of what his playmaking talent is. This was a crash course for anybody who hasn't really been around the Pacers to understand just how gifted a ceiling Tyrese Haliburton has.